Hi, I'm Professor Green, and this is Chapter 8, Part 1, Leadership. And this is a really great chapter because I think so many of you will be in leadership roles very quickly. And also, I think one of the reasons maybe why you went back for your MBA is because you were starting already to naturally critique your leaders in your organization, and you were curious about what it meant to potentially be a great leader. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Here we are. Leadership and followership, right? Because there are two important parts to being a leader, making sure you have followers, which we'll discuss here in part 1. So the learning objectives for this chapter are understanding leadership as a co-creation between leaders and followers. This is the new model in the last 2 decades or so. My dad's or grandparents' generation was, or in the Asian culture still, there's a clear leader and then there are followers. Now, here, the trend is that we do this leadership role in relationship with our followers. So how to be an effective leader and then how to be an effective follower, right? Because leaders are also looking to encourage followers who will then potentially be the next leader. 8.1 has some learning objectives, understanding leadership as a co-creation, as I said, explain the role of relationships, identities, and implicit theories on the leadership co-creation process. So over the last few decades, there's been a lot of research as to how these leadership roles evolve. There are professors out there who study strategy and do a lot of work to understand how people work together. And then the last thing is to recognize the impact of interpersonal and environmental contexts on leadership and followership. So the modern research shows that it depends, right? A leader can be a leader in one situation, but maybe a follower in a different situation. In synopsis. So what is leadership? There's a Professor Ross who became very famous talking about leadership. He defines leadership as influential relationship among leaders and followers who seek to realize a shared purpose. So you have a goal and you're working together to do this. So you have leading and following together, that creates leadership. And then these are the outcomes that you're working on together, this co-creation process. And so a co-creation process is a relational process that, as I mentioned, is different from the conventional, traditional idea that we've seen in previous generations, or still exists very much in Asian or even European organizations sometimes. Co-creation is a relational construction amongst individuals who choose to be leaders and followers. Traditional examination tend to focus on the traits and behaviors of the person, right, in charge, as opposed to co-creation is the interaction among those in an influential relationship, right? So it's a continual relationship between the leader and the follower, as opposed to saying, okay, this person is confident, this person is charismatic, this person is tall, whatever it might be. And so it's a developing relationship. And so, yeah, relationships, as they say, then are central in the leadership process. So to become a leader, you have to have good relationships throughout the organization. And, this showed up actually just in the last few weeks when we have these guest speakers. I feel like in the past, I've seen guest speakers come and they are like, okay, I'm going to talk, or I'm going to have the students ask me a couple questions and I'm going to answer those questions. But now I feel like guest speakers are more up for having this fireside chat between me and the students. So they don't really prepare very much. They don't come with presentations anymore. It's more about let's talk about this. And so, yeah, they want to create a relationship with the students and with me. And I think it's really great. I have to say, I like this new process. Shared leadership is a dynamic influence. The different members step up at different times. Some people will do marketing, some people will do finance, but they're all kind of leading their own little domains. Where team members spread the responsibility. No single team member is responsible for everything. And this is becoming more and more popular because we have matrix organizations and we have these network organizational charts, which I said I don't see very often, but in Silicon Valley, I think they're very popular, and we will probably see them. So yeah, so group members have to step up and then they have to drop back. And so, yeah, I think it's tricky. I don't think we're quite used to it yet. But it's here. So we need to embrace it. Co-leadership is where there are two people who have agreed to be leaders together. So it's nice because they have maybe complementary strengths. That if you do a master's in accounting here at LMU, there are two academic directors. And whenever I speak to them, they both feel like they have their own domain and they work nicely together, and it just really works for them. They are complementary, etc. But I'm not going to lie to you, in the past, when I've been in larger organizations, this sometimes doesn't work because employees don't know like who to reach out to, when to reach out. There's a lot of duplication of work efforts, etc. My personal opinion is that like the roles have to be clearly defined. And the followers really have to know who's doing what. So let's think a little bit more about like how does leadership really work? What doesn't make it so memorable, so productive? There were highly competent leaders probably, and then followers who are partnering with and supporting each other to get the job done, right? So leaders, they're not necessarily born, but they can be trained. And I think that good leaders have worked on their skills. I don't think that many people just wake up one day and they think they're going to be, and they're developed into a leader. I think that definitely the good ones work on this. So leader effectiveness, the ability and willingness of individuals to develop and maintain strong, collaborative, trusting, and mutual beneficial relationships, right? So my cousin, she's kind of a young leader, and I can see she struggles with this. Why do I have to have all these relationships? I'm not a scientist. I just want to do research. Why do I have to like be friends with everybody? But it's the new model. And her dad did not lead like that. And she's kind of following in his footsteps. And I think she's an introvert. I think she's just hesitant to do that type of work. So she stepped now into a role where she doesn't have to have so many followers, and I think it's going to be a better fit for her. So leadership relationships, role finding. Leaders and followers get to know each other and evaluate each other's needs, motivations, and capabilities. And so, yeah, this is, using the MBTI, which I think is so valuable, or the DISC method. So you find out like what people are good at, what people are not good at. When you get to know your manager first, make it time and effort to get to know them as individuals and let them get to know you. In that second stage, now we're role making. So there's an effort to form an understanding of how the individuals will engage with each other. And then the final is role implementation. I feel like I have some colleagues where we're still working on this role making. They've been here for a long time at LMU. I've been here just for a couple of years, and we're still trying to like find how we fit together. And sometimes, yeah, with professors, like we're always shifting. Sometimes some are leaders, sometimes are followers. And even though I've only been here a couple of years, I'm often a leader because if I have a new initiative or a master's program that I run, et cetera. So yeah, we're consistently in the role-making phase. Leadership identities. These are self-identities. They help to determine who will lead and who will follow. This is important, right? Because maybe you've been in a group where nobody wants to lead or nobody wants to follow. And so that's tricky. So leader identity, they see themselves as having this traits, talents, and experience. And so they won't claim to be a leader, and then the follower. But I like this figure 8.2, where it says, there's a person A here, they're trying to be the leader, a person B, they're trying to be the follower, but there might be time here where they're negotiating back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Who's going to be the leader, who's going to be the follower, etc. And again, I think this negotiation happens more often than we realize, because org charts are getting more flat, the trend, and some people, as I said, are leaders in one instance and followers in another. So leadership prototypes, I want to say stereotypes sometimes, right? Because this is a list of things of of traits that people think are leadership leadership prototypes, but sometimes when they don't have these things, there's a dissonance. And we're like, what? They're not the leader. One thing I think here is they're tall, right? Research shows that people follow people more easily if they're tall, and that they say comes from when we're children because we're always looking up at our parents, and so in our subconscious we think that looking up means that that person is going to lead us. But that's not necessarily the case, right? I feel fortunate that I've been tall my whole life. And I do see that sometimes when I'm in a room and people are shorter than me, people will often look to me first, and sometimes leader, but sometimes I'm not, right? And so we just have to be aware if sometimes we, go into a situation and we think, oh my gosh, my leader, she's not tall, or my leader, she's not sympathetic, or she's not hardworking. Is she really the best leader? She or he could be or could not be. So just kind of being aware of these prototypes that we might have in our mind. Leadership is situational, and I think this is like one of the biggest learning things for this chapter or for this section, right? So sometimes leaders are super effective in large organizations, but not so effective in small businesses, or vice versa. Some people are effective in stable industries. Some people like fast, high growth, high risk businesses. So, right, it's not like your leader. I often think, that people, expats is a great example. You get moved from country to country. Maybe you're a great leader in your home country, but not such a great leader in your new country. So it's situational, right? Always linked to the context in which it occurs. So, and so when the contextual factors change, you need to have different expectations, right, of the leaders and the followers. And I can think of many examples of this, but definitely in culture things. I have students that they study in Spain, and my Spanish students are super confident there. And then they come here and they're like, this is a second language for me. And they're not as confident here. So interpersonal context, the social and emotional dynamics among those who are working together, the personalities, emotion, perceptions, motivations, and attributes that people bring to the relationships. So again, making sure that everyone is on the same page, and making sure that people are not feeling misunderstood, or that you're making assumptions about someone. Oh, he's rude, he's obnoxious, I don't want to ever work with him. When you start to say things like that, ever or always, that should be a signal to saying, I need to connect with that person and make sure that I'm understanding exactly what his priorities are. Environmental context, last 3 slides of the chapter. The task environment, right? What are the tasks that we're working on? So the tasks will change from project to project. Organizational environment, if you move from, IT to the finance group to the marketing group, oh my gosh, the culture or whatever it might be can be so different. I first interviewed for the marketing department here at LMU, and they're so fun, and they're such great colleagues, but my focus was more on management. And so when I interviewed for the management team, I was like, oh my gosh, I just feel better here. So, right. I could work with, I'd still work with the marketing professors, but, my home is in the management department. And then the macro environment, social and market forces, right? Your competitors will change, the technology changes, economic policies and regulation, right? So all these things will make the situation change when we move from project to project and understand who's leading and who's following. The complexity views of context. So this is talking about these theories. First, the actor network theory. Again, the same idea that the actors and the networks, as they change, the situation changes, and then the leaders and the followers might have different roles. So it's a dynamic interplay of human and non-human entities that influence the organizational functioning. So, right, all that to say, like, be present, understand what the situation is right here and right now. It's a complicated endeavor, leadership. It requires understanding unpredictable events. Emergence occurs when people, activities, and events link up in ways that drive unexpected outcomes, right? As we continue to see, be prepared, do your research, but don't be surprised if something happens that you don't expect. And so this complexity leadership theory, it recognizes that there are three important leadership functions: entrepreneurial leadership, operational leadership, and enabling adaptive space. So here, this is where the new ideas start. Then the ideas have to be enabled to flow through adaptive space, enabling leadership, a lot more action happening here. And then operational leadership, this is where the ideas get implemented. And I feel like, because I worked in IT, very often people love this area. It's exciting. What can we do? How can this, work? But where I really do well is in the implementation. Okay, all hands on deck, let's make a task list, let's make this happen. And I feel like not everybody loves this space. And so for me, it was good because I really liked it. And I often found that, people like to dream, but they don't necessarily like to figure out how to implement it. But this is a key part. So hopefully that breaks that part for you and helps you understand how leadership kind of has these three different stages. Great. That is the end of part 1 for chapter 8. Thank you so much for joining me. I will see you in part 2 for chapter 8, leadership.